We're going to do something very radical tonight. You all ready for something very radical? We're going to practice democracy, and that doesn't happen all of the time, so that's what we'll do. I'm going to chat for a while, and we'll open it up to your questions and your comments. We have been running around the country, and a lot of people come out to our meetings, and the media is very often surprised at how well we have been doing. When we started this campaign 4.5 months ago, almost 5 months ago, the media kind of thought we were a fringe campaign, and no one was really going to be terribly interested in what we had to say or getting involved in the campaign. Well, a lot has changed in the last 5 months. We have more people. My campaign is the only non-billionaire campaign. I won't name names, but we are the only non-billionaire campaign that doesn't have a super PAC.
You're not for sale.
That's right. That's kind of what I was going to say. And what I was going to say, although you encapsulated it pretty well, is that I don't represent the corporate agenda, and I don't represent the interest of billionaires, and I don't want their money. And so one of the many interesting experiments in this campaign, and it's really quite interesting, is can a candidate who is receiving individual contributions from many, many, many hundreds of thousands of people, averaging something like $31.20. Can you run a campaign that defeats people who will have hundreds of millions of dollars coming from billionaires? And you know what? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe we can. And maybe we are living in a moment in history where the power of money is just so great that they cannot be defeated. Now, I certainly hope that is not the case, and that is what this campaign is about. But that is the reality. So we don't have a super PAC, and we are relying on small individual contributions. And we're getting a lot of them, and we are raising a lot of money. And the good news from our perspective is we are raising enough money to run a winning campaign. So we will be outspent, but we have the money, and you will see our 30-second ads on TV just like everybody else's. Maybe not quite as many, but we'll be there. We're putting together a very strong organization right here in Iowa, and they're doing a great job for us. So we are bringing out large numbers of people all over the country. We are getting a lot of individual contributions, and we also have several 100,000 people who are volunteering on this campaign. And all of that makes me appreciate that we're running a people-oriented campaign. This is a people's campaign of millions of people standing together. And the other reason that I think we are doing pretty good, and there was a guy, I was out on the West Coast a couple of months ago, and the guy came up to me after a very large meeting there, 20,000 people there or something. He said, you know what I like about you? And this is the best compliment I got. He said, you treat us like we're intelligent human beings. And what that means, really, is that we're not running flashy campaigns, and I don't have much establishment support. I don't have the governor of your state here. Well, wouldn't have him in any case, but we don't have a lot of politicians supporting us, a lot of big money supporting us, but we do have a lot of people supporting us. And what we're doing in this campaign is something very simple. We're talking about the most important issues facing the American people. And in my view, I think, and I get very angry at media, and the media has heard me say this a million times, is that media looks at politics today as if it were a baseball game or a soap opera. What do I mean by that? Big stories about the latest poll, who's winning in a poll. Well, that's fine, but it's not the most important thing. How much money did somebody raise? No, that's fine, but that's not the most important thing. Did somebody say something really, really dumb yesterday? Well, that'll be all over CNN, that's for sure. But is that really what impacts your life? Who cares? And what this campaign is trying to do in a very sober way is to say, okay, what are the issues that impact your lives and my family's lives and the lives of tens of millions of Americans? Let's lay them on the table. People may disagree with me, that's fine, that's called democracy. But let's at least have the courage to put the real issues impacting our people on the table and talk about them and see where we can come together. That's kind of what the campaign is about. So let's put the issues on the table. Let's talk about it. In my mind, and I just came back from Washington the other day where I had the honor, really honor, of hearing Pope Francis speak both at the White House and later at the joint session of Congress. And I got to tell you, I'm a big, big fan of the Pope. I don't agree with you. And he's playing a huge role, I think, in raising issues that people would prefer not to have discussed. And it was very interesting seeing them both at the White House and at in the Congress. And one of the issues that he talks about, from a global perspective, and I talk about mostly from a national perspective, is the issue of income and wealth inequality. And it's an enormously important issue. And it's an issue that we have got to address. What do I mean by income and wealth inequality? Well, for a start, some of you may know that the United States of America has more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth. And it is worse today than at any time since 1928. Okay? So what is essentially happening is that you are living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world today. The United States is the wealthiest country in the history of the world, but most people don't know that. Why don't they know that? Well, they're too busy working 2 or 3 jobs, too busy trying to figure out how they're going to provide childcare for their kids or send their kids to college or put gas in the car to get to work. What you are seeing right now is a nation in which the top 1/10 of 1%, 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. There it is. What do you think? 1/10 of 1%. What you're living in is a country where in the last 30 years there has been a massive transfer of wealth. Republicans get very nervous when we talk about distribution of wealth. They start shaking. Very scary to them. But there has been a huge redistribution of wealth in this country over the last 30 years. Problem is, it has gone in the wrong direction. It's gone from... It has gone from the top, it has gone from the middle class and working families to the top 1/10 of 1%, where their percentage of wealth has doubled over the last 30 or so years. Okay. So you end up with a situation where today, where in Iowa or Vermont or all over this country, there are many, many people, millions of people working 2 or 3 jobs to cobble together some income and some health care. Yet, today, 58% of all of the new income being generated, over half, is going to the top 1%. You are living in a country where one family, the Walton family, owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. Now, I'm not talking about some third world country. This is the United States of America. You're living in a country where in the last 2 years, the wealthiest 14 people in this country, 14, not a lot of people, saw their wealth increase by $156 billion. An increase in their wealth, which is more wealth than is owned by the bottom 130 million people. So what do you got? What you got is what most people perceive. You have a rigged economy where ordinary people are working longer hours for lower wages, and almost all of the new wealth and income is going to the top 1%. So what our job together is to create an economy that doesn't just work for the top 1%, but works for a disappearing middle class. Now, when we talk about the middle class, let me make very briefly 2 points. Point number one is I hope everybody in this room knows that the economy today is much, much better than when George Bush left office. Now, it's interesting, I don't know if any of you had the misfortune to watch the Republican debate. I kind of promised that I would tweet out comments on it, and as the hours went by, it became harder and harder. All my energy was dissipated. I barely crawled out of the room at the end of the debate. But their view is, which is pretty sad, is the view that every problem in America and throughout the world is caused by Barack Obama. That's it. Yeah, you name the problem, it is Barack Obama. Before Obama came into office, everything was just, coming up roses. Everything was just beautiful, right? Well, it seems they may have a little bit of amnesia, right? Let's talk about where we were when Bush left office. We were hemorrhaging 800,000 jobs a month. Republicans complained that we're only growing 175,000 a month, which is not enough. I'd like to see more. But 175,000 new jobs are a hell of a lot better than losing 800,000 jobs a month. When Bush left office, and I know it's 7 years ago, and people really do have amnesia. They can't remember what happened 7 years ago. The American and world's financial system was on the verge of collapse. You remember that. There were economists who were worried that you'd put your credit card into an ATM machine and nothing would come out. Okay? That was when Bush left office. And my Republican colleagues who worry very, very much about the deficit in national debt seem to have forgotten that when Bush left office, we ran up the largest deficit in the history of America, $1.4 trillion. That's where we were. And you have to be very, very partisan and very dishonest not to recognize that the economy today is better than it was 7 years ago. But, and here is a big but, and I think sometimes Democrats make this mistake. They say, well, it's much better than it was 7 years ago. True. But if you look at the economy over a 40-year period, under Democratic and Republican leadership, what you have seen is the essential disappearance of the American middle class. That's the fact. So you're looking at a situation where since 1999, median family income, that family right in the middle of the economy, is earning about $4,000 less today than that family did in 1999. If you are a male worker in the middle of the economy, in inflation accounted for dollars, you are making $700 less than you did 42 years ago. Okay? If you are a woman worker in the middle of the economy, you're making about $1,300 less than you made in 2007. So what we are seeing in the overall economy is a huge explosion in technology and worker productivity. People are producing more, but their real wages are declining. They're working longer hours for lower wages. And we have more people living in poverty today in total numbers than at almost any time in the history of our country. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, why is it that with such an explosion of technology and productivity, why are people working longer hours for low wages? How many people here know that our people in the United States work longer hours than do the people of any other major country on earth? Did you all know that? Japanese are very, very hard workers. We work longer hours than the Japanese. Many of our people have 1 week off vacation. You're looking at 85% of male workers in America are working more than 40 hours a week. 65% of women workers are working more than 40 hours a week. We have become accustomed to it. But you all remember in our history books, 100 years ago, workers were fighting for what? 40-hour work week. 100 years have come and gone. We have not achieved that. And in fact, in many ways, we're falling further behind. And I see, when I go around the country, and I look at people, I see people who are exhausted. People who are working incredible hours, strains on their marriages, strains on the relationship with their kids. And we have to ask ourselves why. Why is that happening? And when we talk about the economy, and the reason for that, certainly one of the reasons, is wages in this country for millions of people are just much too low. I was in Des Moines a few months ago, and I met a very nice guy who works with the church group. And what he does is he collects the food that was not sold at the farmer's market, and he takes it to the emergency food shelf. You know what he told me? I said, well, who goes to the emergency food shelf here in Des Moines? And he said, well, about 90% of the people are working. So it's not a question of people being homeless or unemployed. They are working people. But they are not earning enough money to provide adequately for their families. In my view, the minimum wage, the national minimum wage of $7.25 an hour has to be considered a starvation wage. And it's got to be raised, and in my view, raised to $15 an hour over the next several years. It is really not a radical idea to say that if somebody in this country works 40 hours a week, that person should not be living in poverty. And when we talk about fair wages, there's another issue that we have to deal with, and I hope every man in this room will stand with women and fight for pay equity for women. There is no rational economic reason why women are making 87 cents on the dollar compared to men. Just not a rational economic reason for that. Just old-fashioned sexism. Being in Iowa, you have, for better or worse, the opportunity to hear from a lot of politicians. Somehow, everybody loves Iowa. Everybody comes to Iowa. And you're hearing a lot of, Republicans talking about what they call family values. And what Republican family values are about, in my view, are telling every woman in this country that she does not have the right to control her own body. I disagree. And what Republican family values are about are telling our gay brothers and sisters that they do not have the right to get married, and I disagree with that as well. Now, I have 4 kids, and I have 7 beautiful grandchildren, and my wife Jane and I have been married over 27 years, and we believe very strongly in family. In fact, there's nobody I know who believes more strongly in family than my wife does. And we have our family values, but they're very different than Republican family values. And one of our family values is to end the international embarrassment of the United States of America being the only major country on earth, the only one, that does not provide paid and guaranteed family medical leave. One of the things that I enjoy doing in this campaign is just forcing discussion, or at least trying to force discussion, on issues that other people would prefer to kind of push under the rug. But when you talk about family values, here's what we are talking about. And when you talk about paid family and medical leave. Today in Iowa and today in Vermont, a woman is having a baby. And that is, for those of you who are parents, you know what an extraordinary moment, an unforgettable moment that is. If, and it's not only a big day for the mom and dad, it's a pretty big day for the baby as well. For better or worse, that baby is coming into the world. And if that mom has sufficient income and that family has income, she will do what mothers desire to do, and fathers. And that is to get to know their baby, bond with the baby, get to love their baby over a period of time. Every major country on earth provides paid family and medical leave, allowing mothers and fathers to be with that baby in the most important weeks and months of that human being's life. But in Iowa and in Vermont, if that mother does not have sufficient income, what happens to her? She's got to go back to work, which means she is separated from her newborn baby, maybe after a week, maybe after 2 weeks. That is not a family value. That is the exact opposite of a family value. And that is why I am part of legislation in the Senate that would guarantee every family in this country 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. Now, when pollsters call up the American people and they say, what is the issue uppermost on your mind? What are you worried about the most? What is usually the answer the pollsters get? That's right. Who said that? Jobs. That's what it is. The answer is almost always jobs and the economy. Now, why is that? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. The truth is today that unemployment is not 5.1%. That's the official unemployment. Real unemployment is over 10%. You all know what the difference is between real unemployment and official unemployment. Real unemployment includes those people who have given up looking for work, and more importantly, those people working part-time when they want to work full-time. And there are many millions of people who are now working 20, 25, 29 hours a week when they want to work full-time. You add all of that together, real unemployment is over 10%. And here's something else that there has been almost no discussion on. It's an American tragedy and we don't talk about it, and that is youth unemployment. Who wants to guess what real youth unemployment is? Kids who are unemployed, underemployed, or given up looking for work. Between the ages, these are high school graduates, between the ages of 17 and 20. What's your guess?
25.
25%? 50%. All right, here's what it is. I asked some economists in DC to do a study for me. This is what they found. These are high school graduates, not dropouts, between 17 and 20. If the kids are whites, real unemployment rate is 33%. If they are Hispanic, 36%. If they are African American, 51%. Okay? It is, and Pope Francis, by the way, all over this world, youth unemployment is a huge, huge issue. It is an issue in America, and we cannot continue to ignore it. And I'll tell you why. It's not only, in a sense, turning our backs on a generation of young people who want to stand up on their own 2 feet, get out of the house, start a career, make some money, become independent. We're turning our backs, but there is another issue directly related to it. How many of you know that in America today, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth? Did you all know that? We have 2.2 million people in jail, federal, state, local jails. That is more people in jail by a big number than China, 3 times our size, which is a communist authoritarian country. And if anybody here thinks there is not a correlation between very high rates of youth unemployment and the kinds of incarceration rates that we have, I think you would be mistaken. So what I believe passionately, not only from a human perspective, but if you are a conservative from a financial perspective, it makes infinitely more sense for us to invest in jobs and education rather than jails and incarceration. The truth is it costs a lot more money to put people in jail than to send them to the University of Iowa. That's just a fact. So instead of allowing these kids to drop out of school, get into really bad environments, get into trouble, and end up in jail, we have to keep our eyes on those kids and make sure that they get jobs and that they have the education that they need. And I would hope that together we can create a nation where we end this horrendous distinction of having more people in jail and instead become the nation of the world, which has the best educated people on earth. And it seems to me if we have real unemployment of over 10% and youth unemployment off the charts, it's kind of a no-brainer to say that the federal government should be creating a massive federal jobs program to put millions of people back to work at decent wages. Instead of firing teachers, we should be hiring teachers. And further, all of you know that in our country today, our infrastructure, that's our roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, levees, dams, rail, airport, all of those are in very bad shape, and we are investing far less of our GDP than most other countries on earth. And that is why I have proposed and introduced legislation that would put $1 trillion over a 5-year period into rebuilding our infrastructure. And when we do that, we create up to 13 million decent paying jobs. And when we talk about jobs, it is not only the need to create millions of good paying jobs, it is the need to prevent the loss of millions of jobs through disastrous trade policies. Now, trade, although I understand here in Newton you have dealt with that issue a little bit, but trade is not a sexy issue that gets a lot of discussion, but it is enormously important. You're looking at a senator and a former congressman who voted against NAFTA, against CAFTA, against permanent normal trade relations with China, and will help lead the effort against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I think most Americans now understand what these trade policies are about. It's not very complicated. If you are the head of a large corporation, what you would like to do, and if you were greedy, and if you didn't care much about your fellow Americans, the kind of trade policy that you would want is a policy which allows you to shut down plants in America, move them abroad to low-wage countries, pay people very low wages, and then bring your products back into this country. And that's exactly what's happened. Since 2001, we have lost in this country 60,000 factories and millions of decent paying manufacturing jobs. Now, not all of that is attributable to trade. There are other factors as well, but a lot of it is. So I think that we need to fundamentally rethink our trade policies, and we should tell corporate America that instead of just investing in China and Vietnam, they may want to start investing in Iowa and Vermont. There's another issue out there of huge consequence, and that is when we talk about greed and when we talk about fraud and dishonesty and arrogance, these are just a few of the words to describe Wall Street. As all of you know, as a result of the greed and recklessness and illegal behavior on Wall Street, this country was driven into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. Millions of people lost their jobs, lost their homes, lost their life savings. And then our friends on Wall Street came begging to the United States Congress for their welfare check. And they said, please bail us out, because if we go down, we're going to take half the economy with us. And Congress, against my vote, provided a very huge bailout to Wall Street. And not only did Congress write a check, but also the Fed provided trillions of dollars in short-term loans to banks in this country, major corporations and central banks all over the world. Now, here's what is interesting. Two things that are interesting is, number one, today 3 out of the 4 largest banks that we bailed out because they were too big to fail. Remember too big to fail? Well, you'll be not surprised to know that 3 out of the 4 largest are bigger today than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. And the second point is, we need, in my view, a financial system, a banking system, whose main function is to provide affordable loans to small and medium-sized businesses, to people who want to buy homes, who are part of the productive economy. What you have right now is a banking system to a significant degree which is an island unto itself. Their only goal in life is to make as much money as they can for themselves, separate from the economy. And that is why I believe 2 things. Number one, we have got to reestablish Glass-Steagall. And what that is the legislation that prevented the merger of commercial banks and investor banks and insurance companies. I voted against the deregulation of Wall Street. But that's what that was. But the second and more important thing that we've got to do is, when you have banks that are too big to fail, when they issue 95% of all derivatives and hold more than 40% of all bank deposits, when they issue more than 2/3 of all credit cards in this country and over 35% of all mortgages, what do you think Teddy Roosevelt would do if he were alive today? You got it. That's exactly what he would do, and that is exactly what I think we should do. You know, it's a funny thing that we really talk about. Teddy Roosevelt, as you all know, was a good Republican. And now you can't find Democrats who are prepared to do what Teddy Roosevelt talked about doing 100 years ago. Bottom line is, if an institution is too big to fail, it is too big to exist. Now, let me then, very often people will ask me, some of you might ask me, well, what is, you're raising a lot of issues out there. What is the most important issue out there? And it's impossible to say, because all of these issues are of huge consequence. But let me tell you one issue which impacts